Hello and welcome to the 2022 edition of the Tax House Conference. Can I please see a round of applause from everyone that is equally excited to be a part of this edition of the conference? Thank you very much for joining us from different parts of the world. My name is Damilola Busari, and I am delighted to be the host of the 2022 edition of the conference. Thank you very much for joining us from different parts of the world. If you can quickly oblige me, because I know that this is a global conference and we have an audience from different parts of the world, please kindly put in the comment section the part of the world that you're joining us from. Let me formally welcome you and let everyone know what part of the world you're joining us from the conference today. Thank you very much, Mr. Oluwafemi Adams. What part of the world are you joining us from today? This is the 2020 from Nigeria. Thank you very much, Mr. Oluwafemi Adams. This is the 2022 edition of the Taxpayers Conference convened by Tax House. And this year, our theme is boosting taxpayers' morale globally, our role. Wow, we have someone from Abeokuta, Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Gbadebo Adebayo. I'm super delighted. So quickly do me a favor. I love that you, your friends, your family, everyone is a part of the conference this year. This topic that we're discussing is one that everyone must be a part of. So do me a quick favor and take the link to the broadcast, the YouTube broadcast, share it on all your social media handles so that people can also be a part of the rich and insightful discussions that we are going to have today. Today we have our keynote speaker, Mr. Daniel Witt. We also have a number of panel sessions where we'll be having insightful discussions on the theme of the conference, which is boosting taxpayers' morale globally, our role. You and I have a part to play in ensuring that taxpayers' morale is boosted and they are encouraged to ensure that they pay their taxes and, of course, contribute their own quota to the development of the world as a whole. We have a number of panel sessions today so that you know it's going to be an insightful discussion. It's going to be about 3 hours of insightful, engaging discussions today. And I'd like to give you a heads up right now and say to you, please pay keen attention. I'll be asking questions, and there might just be a gift for you to receive if you participate and pay keen attention in the course of all the discussions. Today as well, there's going to be allowance for you to ask your questions. So as the conversation goes on, if at any point in time you have questions that you want answered by the many experts that will be joining in the discussion today from across the globe, please note those questions. Know that definitely there would be answers to your questions. Please put your questions in the YouTube chat, as that's where we'll be curating them and getting them from. Amazing. We have someone from Botswana. Hello, brother. Welcome to Taxpayers Conference 2022. The first panel session we'll be having today is on building a sustainable tax paying culture, the challenges and solutions. We know that a lot goes on and lots of times citizens are not encouraged, but today we'll be having that conversation to change the narrative when it comes to paying of taxes. The second panel session for today is on the role of the media in boosting taxpayers' morale. I must let you know at this point in time that it's a 2-day conference. So this is day one. We would also have day two of the conference tomorrow, same time, by God's grace. So definitely you want to ensure that your friends, your family, stakeholders in this sector are a part of the insightful conversations that we would be having. Right now, I'm about to invite someone who I call a very important personality. He is the convener of the conference and he is the founder of Tax House. Can we please put our hands together for the convener of the conference, Mr. Olajide Omoshebi? Can we please give him a round of applause? Can we please give him a round of applause? He's going to be giving us his speech in a bit. But before then, let's get to know him a bit more. Olajide Omoshebi is the founder of Tax House, and he's also a public relations officer of the Taxation Committee of the Nigerian Bar Association on Business Law. He's a researcher, author, and teacher who also serves as the technical reviewer of the Nigerian Tax Review, a leading tax report in Nigeria, which analyzes all the tax news and trends within the Nigerian landscape annually. He's a fellow of the Institute of Management Consultants and a certified management consultant with about a decade cognate experience in corporate tax practice, tax health check, legal practice, and SME support. Olajide is a candidate in the Master in Taxation program at the leading academy in tax scholarship in Nigeria, Lagos State University. He is also an alumnus of the prestigious Afe Babalola University with a double award recognition from the management and board of the university for being the most progressive student during her second convocation ceremony and a Golden Award of Excellence as for his selfless contribution by Are Afe Babalola SAN as the pioneer legal advisor of the Afe Babalola University Alumni Association. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as I welcome the convener of the conference and the founder of Tax House, Mr. Olajide Omoshebi, for his opening remarks. Can I please see you put your hands together as I
Hello, everyone, and good morning. Thank you, Mrs. Busari, for the wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. I am Olajide Omoshebi, the founder of Tax House and the convener of this year's conference. It brings me so much delight to have you all here with us today, joining from different parts of the world. It's most humbling to have people from Botswana, Washington, D.C., as I can see your chat. Thank you all for joining from across the globe. So why this conference? Before that, let me say last year's conference, what did we plan to achieve? We wanted to inspire tax enthusiasts, students across the globe, practitioners, administrators, and we achieved that through the feedbacks we got from students, from attendees globally, saying that they were inspired. And of course, they also were inspired by the life and the scholarship of Professor Judith Friedman, who was our own keynote speaker. This year's conference, if you look across the globe, you will realize that there's a low morale among taxpayers. Taxpayers don't want to pay taxes. Taxpayers don't want to comply. We have issues with tax evasion. We have issues with tax avoidance. Why? That is why this year we have brought together some of the best minds across the globe, from the revenue authorities, from academia, from media, from even taxpayers, from even the tax experts, to help us look into the issue. What can we do differently to encourage taxpayers to pay taxes? In the end, these are the revenues, these are the monies used to fund budget across the globe. Government need the money to fund their project, but of course, it's taxpayers' money, and taxpayers should have a say in how their revenues or how their monies are being spent, and they need to know their money is being spent on, which is why we have brought this conference for your own benefit. If it's not too early, allow me to equally appreciate the planning committee. It is very easy to conceive a vision, but making it a reality is a difficult task. Allow me to appreciate Rosemond Filotiwa, Mr. Sesi Ondeyin, Olabimpe Oladokun, Funke Bolode Oku, Akinrinde Akinloluwa, Umo Usoro, Abdulateef, Mr. Oluwafemi Adams, Adeniyi, John Kolade, Bumi Ogbontiba, and please, if I miss your name, kindly excuse me, please. I want to appreciate all the planning committee members for their tremendous support to making this event a success, because it will be a success, for making it a reality for the benefit of taxpayers across the globe. You are encouraged to join, to share the links, and please accept my appreciation for joining from across the globe. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Can we please give a round of applause to Mr. Olajide Omoshebi? Thank you very much for your inspiring words, sir. Truly, this is a conference that is needed at this point in time because the government cannot do the work alone. Development must be done by every citizen across the globe, and paying of taxes definitely is one way to ensure that you contribute your own quota to the development of your own country and your own part of the world. Thank you very much for setting the tone for the conference today. Without further ado, we're about to have our keynote address by our keynote speaker, distinguished Mr. Daniel Wheat. Daniel A. Wheat has been working to promote free markets and helping to lower the barriers to tax, trade, and investment in transition economies for over 30 years. Having worked with 85 countries, he has also co-developed a unique neutral table to bring together the public sector, private sector, and academics to advance pro-investment economic policy reforms. Being among the first foreigners to discuss international tax and investment issues with the Russian Federation in 1991, the Republic of Kazakhstan in 1993, Vietnam in 1996, Iraq in 2004, Libya in 2006, and Myanmar in 2012, Mr. Wheat is a recognized expert in newly opened up frontier markets. Mr. Wheat is the president of the International Tax and Investment Center, ITIC, which he helped found in September 1993. ITIC is a global brand trusted as a reliable source of tax and investment policy and administrative expertise. Mr. Wheat is also the co-founder of the Arab Regional Tax Forum, Asia Pacific Tax Forum, Eurasia Fiscal Experts Seminar, and the Africa Tax Forum that regularly bring together hundreds of government officials and legislators with industry representatives, academics, and other experts to propose tax and investment climate reforms. The Republic of Kazakhstan has recognized Mr. Wheat for his contribution to economic development. In 1999, he was elected an honorary professor of economics at the Kazakh State Academy of Management. In 2011, Kazakhstan President Nursultan Nazarbayev presented Mr. Wheat with the Order of Dios Friendship, the highest honor bestowed to a foreigner. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome with me the keynote speaker of Taxpayers Conference 2022, Mr. Daniel A. Witt. Can we please?
Well, thank you for that very gracious introduction. I only wish I was sitting with you in person in Abuja or Lagos. I think many of you are in Lagos. We had a conference about 10 years ago in Abuja, and it was absolutely wonderful. We had great work, but the food and the festive feeling, I still remember to this day. Our first Africa Tax Forum was held in Pretoria in cooperation with the South African Treasury and the African Tax Institute in 2002. So I enjoy regularly coming to Africa. I'm sad that it's been disturbed because of the COVID situation, but I'm looking forward, before the end of the year is out, to be back in Africa. Today, I would like to discuss how governments across Africa can address the fiscal challenges you face, thankfully, post-COVID, and restart vitally needed economic growth. The theme really of my remarks today that cuts across it all is growth, restoring economic growth and with it employment, and then many good things in terms of revenue and reducing the budget pressure. The fiscal space will get better. Even before the current developments, the Ukraine-Russia war, many African countries face challenges, including higher food and energy prices as you emerged from the pandemic. Now, with higher interest rates, many governments' fiscal situation has tightened, and it's leaving less fiscal space for expansionary policies that you had at the start and during the pandemic. So the fundamental question now is, how can governments in Africa address this situation and restart vitally needed economic growth? The key is investment, because employment can only recover through growth. A proven path is to implement policies that attract investment, both foreign and domestic. And growth-friendly tax policy is an often overlooked tool to promote investment. Again, growth-friendly tax policy. And in order to have this, there must be a mutual understanding and trust between business, the taxpayers, and the tax administration. A few months ago in the spring, I spoke at the World Government Summit Forum in Dubai. I met many of your colleagues, many senior government officials and ministers from throughout Africa participated. Our panel discussed how to build a tax system that promotes both growth and fairness. In particular, we examined, does moving towards a fairer, more equal global tax system encourage long-term, equitable, inclusive, and sustainable growth? The impetus behind the reforms that are being discussed by the G20 and the OECD sounds good. Gaps in tax rules have encouraged profit sharing to low tax jurisdictions, thereby eroding domestic tax bases. Thus, the international community, which included many African countries, has sought to reshape the international tax architecture, and it culminated with the base erosion and profit shifting project. Then came pillars 1 and 2. We won't go into the details of those this morning. I trust others on the panels later over the next 2 days may do so. And looking at the knowledge with Tax House and Addit, I trust many of you are familiar with these. Done well, international tax reform as a holistic package should increase compliance, weaken the shadow economy, and not harm your investment climate. Now, the risk, if these reforms are done poorly, implemented poorly, revenues may fall, leaving governments even more cash strapped and causing fiscal challenges that may undermine your investment efforts. How can countries both implement this global system of tax reform and promote foreign investment that brings jobs and growth, particularly when many of your countries rely heavily on corporate income tax? And I honestly say this to governments around the world. Perhaps governments around the world are relying too heavily and expecting too much from corporate income tax. More specifically, how will these tax reforms impact investment flows to Africa as you seek to attract investments if you no longer have tax competition as a policy tool? Not some tax competition is bad for the countries, but not all tax competition is bad. This is where I disagree with some of my distinguished colleagues. Governments in Africa need to consider these issues carefully when you're exploring fiscal options for building back after COVID. No single response will apply to all countries. At minimum, however, the recipe for preparedness is clear. First, and I'm going to touch on 3 areas this morning. First, balance revenue needs while preserving a strong investment climate. Many governments around the world have already taken bold steps in reforming tax administration, steps that helped both governments and taxpayers, business. African countries may also consider more recent approaches, such as building tax compliance into taxpayer systems, leveraging the use of technology, and building good relationships with taxpayers to enhance tax compliance and thereby improve collections. And that gets into the heart of the theme of the 2-day conference we're kicking off. Second, consider value-added tax. An important source of revenue in 160 countries is VAT. Now, we all know VAT was hit hard during the pandemic as consumption precipitously declined, and so did its revenue. However, I believe you're seeing a significant increase in consumption and overall economic activity as we get further and further from the dark days of the pandemic. Tax to GDP ratios have been below the tipping point, which some say is 15% in many African countries, even before the pandemic, and they significantly need to improve. Addressing VAT may be challenging, but the fiscal situation requires you to take a good look at your options. Where appropriate, tackling VAT now may be the best way to increase revenues without unduly hampering recovery. It is less distorting than many other taxes. It discourages investment and growth less than many other taxes, such as corporate income tax. or individual income tax on small business owners. For most countries, a well-functioning VAT is an essential component of your recovery and future prospects. And to make your VAT better, fairer, simpler, focus on the policy gap, which are your exemptions. And you must also focus on your compliance gap, which are your non-payments. Many African countries can improve compliance to boost revenue through simplifying the VAT and lowering your compliance costs. For small business, VAT should be simplified by introducing the appropriate threshold where a small business comes into the system and simplifying your registration and filing, simplifying so it can be done on a handheld phone. Relatively small and simple changes can help taxpayers and governments alike with little, if any, adverse effect on revenue. Raising the VAT, the rate, raising your rate should not be the only choice for countries, some of whom have relatively high rates. A broad-based VAT is more growth friendly. And I know from the wonderful time that I spend in Africa that many of your countries have tax holidays and you use tax-free zone type of provisions. And these are harmful to your VAT base. These tax expenditures, in many cases, are high. And in my opinion, I've seen many that are not necessary to attract investment. To broaden the VAT base, the emphasis should be on rationalizing exemptions in a way that reduces tax expenditures and does not harm investment or your people. Third, take a sectorial approach. Most African countries are diversified: extractive industries, telecommunications, consumer products, banking and financial services, all together make for a vibrant, dynamic, and growing economy. Let's look in natural resources, which affect, happily, I come from they are a blessing, not a curse, as some say. You can have bad people that mismanage the revenues, but the resources themselves, if properly managed, are a blessing. However, you must look now and think about how may you reform the upstream fiscal regime affecting natural resources. Reduce the regulations to promote stability and attract capital. A competitive fiscal regime does not necessarily imply low tax rates, but rather investors want to focus. They focus, so government should focus on the same elements. And an investor looks at much more than the rate, a swift payback and recovery of capital spending. So taxing, you should be taxing profits, not revenue. In this shift, you should think, as you think about how can you move to taxing profits rather than revenue using instruments. This will spur investment as it will align with the investors' criteria and benchmarks for swift payback and recovery of capital. So you must look at more than the rate. And we all know African economies are broader than natural resources. Small and medium-sized businesses remain the backbone of many economies and the engine to restore your growth. Even though they often account for less than 20% of your overall revenues, small and medium-sized enterprises support the larger economy as both customers and suppliers, and this drives growth and employment. As the key to recovery for SMEs is cash flow, this should guide fiscal policy to promote employment. Again, understanding the business that is subject to the tax and knowing what they need to succeed, to stay profitable, to employ more people, the more overlap between the tax regime and the tax administration procedures and the needs of business, that is win-win. That will drive growth, employment, and revenue. So thinking about cash flow, and I think tax administrations throughout Africa did a very good job at the start of and during the pandemic, deferring tax payments, flexible payment terms, waiving penalties to the hardest hit sectors, keeping this going in a reasonable, measured way may reduce short-term revenue, but it'll help rebuild employment in the sector. And as you exit from these pandemic measures, it requires a gradual strategy to withdraw these support mechanisms. It's important to determine how these measures will be withdrawn and which sectors will bear the cost of adjustment. In all of this, it's important to pay attention to the views and the metrics of success of your taxpayers and your investors. And investors are foreign and domestic, because investors can choose where to place their capital. And with corporate tax being harmonized through some of the global initiatives, other factors will drive investment decisions. Responsible foreign investors want to pay legitimate tax, but they also want a system that is transparent, stable, and easy to manage. Whatever responses you choose, government should act swiftly to promote recovery and clarity so taxpayers know how to apply them. Rapid change with good communication and good engagement with your taxpayers is possible and indeed desirable. But stability, clarity, and ease of compliance must be paramount. These factors will foster compliance, which will equal higher revenue and attract investment. And I pray we have COVID in the rearview mirror. There may be subvariants that emerge, but clearly the fiscal effects of the pandemic will last longer than the disease itself. Getting the balance of policies right will take finesse and a clear understanding of the international investment conditions. Your objective should be to promote growth as well as a fair and just tax system. Ladies and gentlemen, I urge governments to seize this opportunity and to take action now to make a bid for growth. And remember, growth will itself provide the revenues to address the Sustainable Development Goals. For the last 2 years, our focus has been on COVID. Our discussion and having it at the center of our thinking, the Sustainable Development Goals have taken a little bit of a back seat. But now is the time to refocus on what must be done to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And only growing economies that are producing revenue and bringing jobs to Africa will this be possible. And to achieve this scale of investment, partnerships with business are essential. Therefore, this is an extremely timely conference. Governments must act quickly to reset tax systems to aid both economic recovery and increase revenues in the challenging new global tax landscape. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to share these thoughts with you this morning or this afternoon as you sit in Africa. I look forward to meeting you personally on my travels over the next few months, and I wish you a fruitful and enriching conference to help plan it, a roadmap that will restore growth and employment and prosperity to countries and people all across Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daniel Witt. A round of applause for him, please. That was definitely an insightful speech. Thank you very much, sir. A few things that I personally took away from that, and I hope going forward, governments and key stakeholders are able to implement specifically for me is simplifying the payment of VAT, ensuring that it's something that every business owner can do from their mobile phone by themselves without any assistance of any professional. That will definitely be one step in the right direction to ensure that taxpayers are out to pay their tax once things become as easy as ABC. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the topic, especially in line with growth and development. Thank you so much, Mr. Witt. Can we all please appreciate our keynote speaker? Thank you so much, sir. It's about to get a whole lot more interesting right here in the conference. Please ensure that you have your pen, your paper ready to take notes because this next session is one that will definitely be thought provoking and insightful. We're about to have our first panel session where we'll be discussing building a sustainable tax paying culture. We have 5 panelists on this panel, and it will definitely be a very, very insightful one. We have Mr. Gabriel Olajide Ogunjemilusi, who is the panel chair for this session. Mr. Ogunjemilusi is a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, an associate member of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. He is a holder of an HND in accountancy from the Polytechnic Ibadan, and he also holds a master's degree in business administration. His experience in tax administration spans over 27 years in the FIRS, that's the tax body here in Nigeria, out of which he spent over 17 years in the oil and gas department. He retired from the service having reached the age of 60 years just a couple of months ago in March 2022, and he's currently the special advisor technical to the executive chairman of the FIRS. That is going to be the panel chair for this next session. We also have Mr. Lamre Lassis Phillips, who is currently the chairman Tax Appeal Tribunal, Lagos Zone Panel 1. He's an established legal practitioner with a bias for tax practice, and he was formerly the practice head of ASCO LP, a corporate tax firm. Prior to that, he managed the Brooks Solicitors, a firm that specializes in trade and investment as well as corporate practice. Amongst others, he was a resource speaker at an in-house training organized for the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service on principles and practice of tax appeal under the Personal Income Tax Act by Prioritious Solicitors in 2015. Mr. Lanre is also a consummate academic and has a number of publications online as well as in reputable law journals to his credit. Another of our panelists for this session is Mr. Keith Brookman. Mr. Keith Brookman is the Vice President of Global Tax for Wellbit Inc. He is he is based in Newport Richey, Florida, USA, and he authored the Best Practices International Tax blog at strategizingtaxrisks.com. Mr. Brockman is a frequent presenter at international tax conferences. He has over 30 years of experience as a corporate tax executive. He is a member of Tax Executives Institute as well as the Manufacturers Alliance Tax Council. Also on this power-packed panel, you can tell by now, is Martiana C. Pahuta. Martiana is a public policy enthusiast who has been working for the Indonesian Tax Authority, the Directorate General of Taxes, for more than 19 years. She is now responsible for Indonesia's inbound and outbound exchange of information, EOI, for the Asian countries. She's eager to disseminate her knowledge and experience to others, and she was a contributor at Tax Talk magazine, the official journal of the South African Institute of Tax Practitioners. Last but not the least, the last member of this panel is Mr. John Umpoha. He's an associate in the Africa and Middle East Department, and he's also a researcher in the Center for Studies in African Taxation, CSAT, at the International Bureau of Fiscal Documentation, IBFD, in Amsterdam, Netherlands. He has editorial responsibility for all tax analytical publications of select countries in sub-Saharan Africa. He is also part of the team that organizes the annual Africa Tax Symposium, ATS. He is a published author, and one of his articles on the ongoing debates under the digital economy taxation, titled Article 12B UN Model 2021, was published in the Bulletin for International Taxation 2022. These esteemed panelists together have over 100 years of experience in tax practices, and I am sure that we will definitely have an insightful conversation with them. To moderate the panel session on building a sustainable tax-paying culture, challenges and solutions is the principal partner of In Black and White LP, Aderisola Fagure. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the moderator of this panel as we move into the panel session.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. At least it's afternoon in Lagos, from where I am, and I respect all other time zones. So, be it morning where you are, be it evening, it's a pleasure to have everyone on here. We heard the keynote speech, which pointed to having a simpler tax regime and as a way of building a sustainable tax culture. I'd like to welcome everyone again, and we'll just go right to it. I'll be starting my questioning. I'll be starting by engaging Mr. Brookman. on the aspect of transparency, because you can't have a sustainable tax regime without talking about transparency. So I'd like to tap your views on transparency vis-a-vis a developed economy and a developing economy, and what we as a developing economy can do to improve transparency in our tax system.
No, thank you. I think to improve transparency, I think both trust and mutuality need to be present between both the taxpayer and the tax administrations, and several maybe ways to accomplish that transparency is for incoming tax legislation, for public consultations. Also, I think input by the multinational community, the business community, is very important and can provide some best practices and maybe in the final regulations to be issued. But most of all, I think it's to be transparent in drafting the laws, enforcing the laws, having fair and mutual provisions in the laws, whether it's for refunds or for payments. And as Mr. Daniel Witt, provided, it should also be fairly simple to access the technologies to make the tax filings, the tax payments as simple as possible, even though tax law is complex. But the simpler we can make it, I think the more transparency we can achieve as a win-win by both the taxpayer and the tax administrations.
Thank you so much for that. I see Matiana nodding, even though I'm not, I can see you nodding vigorously. Would you have anything to add to that?
Hi, I hope you can hear me clearly because I'm so far away from Lagos here in Jakarta, Indonesia. Yeah, I do agree with Keith. Yes, of course, there is a need for transparency. We're not talking about transparency between a tax administration with other tax administrations, but here the first step is transparency between tax administration with its taxpayers. So I do agree that we have to bridge some gap here, because there are theories that say taxpayers are actually try to comply with the law. So we need to ensure that they have enough education, proper education about their tax obligations prior to require them to comply with the law. So there is, of course, a need for us to be transparent in the drafting of the regulation and also in the application of the regulation. So I do agree with Keith Brockman here. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll be going to Mr. Lanre Lasisi Phillips. I'm not sure I can pronounce it well, but apologies if I didn't. So would you have some practical, is there a way that tax administrators can actually have a say or regulate the spending of the tax revenues by the government at any level? So can we have a say as to how much of our taxes are spent and what is being spent on?
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm audible enough.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. The concept of tax itself, when you look at the concept, it does not confer any kind of direct benefit, on the taxpayer. Tax revenues are to be utilized, basically for public purposes, and that is within, the precinct of the government to determine. So when you look at it from that perspective, it would then seem that the taxpayer may not have a say in how, tax revenues are spent. But having said that, because we're looking at, boosting taxpayers' morale, it would then seem that even though government have, absolute discretion as to how the revenues are spent, tax revenues are spent, there should be really some way by which the taxpayers will have a say into how it is spent. Because of course, and I want to use myself for an example. If I have, to provide for myself all the time, my tax money is, is taken and spent somewhere else, and I do not see, any meaningful impact, in my own life or in my environment. Of course, I will not be so motivated, to pay. I mean, just decided, okay, I want to be a non-filer or perhaps become anonymous, find myself out of the tax net. So, so it's important in a way that we should also have a say into how that is done, and we can do that. That can be done, at the level of engagement with organized private sector. I know that there is always consultations going on behind the scene, and of course, people get to make inputs, which can then, at the back, be directed to government so that everybody can see tax money in action. But strictly speaking, I do not think that a taxpayer can decide how government expends tax revenue, because it is government discretion to determine what it considers as an overriding public interest, and that is where ordinarily government would channel the tax revenue.
Thank you
Thank you.
so I would agree with you that if there's greater accountability just in terms of government, it may encourage taxpayers, but you can't necessarily hold the government to what the tax is being spent on. So I'll move on to Mr. John Umpoha. Would you have any, as a researcher who has studied a number of jurisdictions, would you have any advice looking at other jurisdictions as to how we as developing nations can improve transparency? Because at the heart of taxation and revenue collection is that issue of transparency. Many people say, why will I pay my taxes if I'm of what the taxes are being used for? So how can we better ensure transparency in tax spending?
Thank you very much. I hope you can also hear me loud and clear.
We can.
Yes, thank you. When I look at the concept of tax spending, others call it tax expenditure. So of course there's a distinction between tax expenditure and the normal budget allocation. So tax expenditure usually or tax spending or tax expenditure has the idea about looking at the tax exemptions, incentives, and some of these incentives that can be given to certain individuals or sectors. So the idea is, I mean, what can countries do in order to improve I mean the relationship between taxpayers and the tax administrators or tax collectors? So we know, like in a number of countries, there's a talk about improving tax transparency, tax expenditure reporting, for example, and that the countries need to report the tax expenditure just as they report about the other allocations of the budget. Who are the beneficiaries, and if we give a tax expenditure, what are the benefits? Of course, in Africa, there are some countries which have been able to publish tax expenditure reporting as a way of improving transparency. In Africa, the tax expenditure started in 2005. For example, Morocco has published. We have countries like South Africa and Mauritius, which are publishing their tax expenditure reports. We have Senegal, and at the same time, there are other countries who indicate that they have some reports, or they're progressing towards that. Countries like we have Ethiopia, for example. Countries like Botswana, they are doing some processes. Countries like Nigeria, they say they are doing something about tax expenditure reporting, but the information is not in the public domain. So overall, of 54 countries in Africa, for example, it's only about 15 countries who have been able who have tried to publish the tax expenditure reporting. So, and the tax expenditure reporting is supposed to be part of the budget process. Why I'm saying about budget process, you know that there's a concept of there's no taxation without representation. For example, if we are not represented, if you are not the laws are not passed by the parliament, then you cannot tax. in a way, when we give the power to the parliament to pass laws, we're agreeing that, okay, we can be taxed in this way. So if the tax expenditure reports pass through the parliament and the parliament approves, then we can improve our relationship or transparency in a way. So in short, it's have to pass through the parliament, and the parliament has to approve this tax expenditure reports. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As a tax administrator, Mr. Ogunjemilusi, what would you have to say? Who practices in Nigeria and who's part of the regulators, who has worked actively with the regulators? What's your take on this, sir?
Thank you, moderator, and a good afternoon from Lagos here. I greet every other part from where you are, wherever you are. Good day. Yeah, in terms of tax expenditures, as just mentioned by John, Nigeria is has started and we are already on course. In no distant time, we are going to come up with our own publication. We have a department now specifically this to man the tax expenditure in Nigeria. And as regards the transparency in Nigeria as for tax matters, we are now more than ever before. You will notice that from 2019, we have started having a finance bill, and we later turned to Finance Act, of which publics are made to participate in the formulation, even of the policies, even to the bill, and even to the enactment through the public engagement by the National Assembly before the bills are passed to the Act. Also, in the drafting of our tax notes in Nigeria, now we involve taxpayers, stakeholders, before we come up with information circulars, regulations, to have their buy-in and also to have their input into the bills. So these we have been put in place to ensure that people have more confidence in the tax system in Nigeria in order to boost their compliance and even the tax paying culture. As regards other things, we are coming up with new innovations, new policies to ensure that people are really engaged better than before. And when we engage taxpayers, definitely we have improved compliance, and also the people will be willing to pay their taxes. As regard what Larry said as whether tax administration should have a say in how the tax money is spent, I think it deviated a bit. It spoke more on the taxpayers rather than tax administrator. I wanted to say that tax administrator is part of government and he will not know. They may not have a say in how government spends its money. I agree with Mr. Larry completely that government has the strong power to spend the money, but at the same time, government also needs to make it known to the taxpayer how their monies are being spent and be able to account. And that is, I believe, that is the spirit of what we have in this allocations of revenue every year through the budget. The budget is passed, the National Assembly, people make their inputs and they see what the projects that government wanted to embark upon. And also in Nigeria now to that, where there's a website now created by Ministry of Finance that individual taxpayer can monitor the project that government is embarking on. I think you guys is to the public domain. You can look at it and have questions. Yeah, we are making a lot of progress. And we believe that this, at the end of the day, will culminate into more compliance from taxpayer. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking us through the developments that are going on in Nigeria to ensure transparency in tax spending. I would not want to pass you because the next question is something that I think you'd be able to shed a bit of light on, particularly as regards the jurisdiction where you practice. So it has been said that there's a relationship between the rule of law in any jurisdiction and tax enforcement, because you can't take enforcement of taxes out of the rule of law. So what role does the rule of law play in ensuring enforcement of taxes? Enforcement of tax, payment of tax.
Is that one to me or to another person?
I won't pass you. I'll just go with you so that you can answer.
Okay. Rule of law is very important as regards the enforcement, because any enforcement carried out of the law is a violation, and taxpayers can definitely take up whosoever the tax method that has done that. And that is why tax authority are not usually, they don't have the final say as regard most of the enforcement, at least when it has to do with taking over of properties of taxpayers, defaulting taxpayers. It has to, in Nigeria, for example, before you can do this train, you need to take, when it has to go to the EU of disposals of freehold property, you need to get court injunction, court judgment before it can be disposed of. It's not, and also that is even the last resort. There are a lot of places, steps to take to that before that can be enforced. We have the tax appeal tribunal where taxpayer can run into if they are not in agreement with whatever assessment has been raised upon them, and even they can even place some kind of objections to assessment so that it will not be enforced. And also the law, the processes are well laid down in the law, which a tax authority needs to follow before they can enforce. So I would say that rule of laws is very, very important as to enforcement of taxes.
Thank you much,
Thank
sir.
you.
Very much for that. So you just mentioned tax tribunals, and I know that is part of Mr. Lanre's forte. So I'll take him up on the next question, which has to do with, are there any limitations caused by the application of the rule of law to enforcement? So do we have any challenges as regards the extent to which we can enforce the rule of law affecting enforcement within the tax regime?
Well, I'm not too sure if I understood your question correctly, but I would try to locate it within my own understanding. Now, the rule of law is a measure of compliance with the law itself, and
Yes.
it means that things have to be done in accordance with the law. Now, you are asking if there are limitations, that's what I presume, as a result of the application of the rule of law. Of course, there cannot be, because the rule of law, every other procedure, your enforcement that you want to, effect must be located within the rule of law. So the rule of law defines, your ground. It defines the parameter within which, the tax authority can operate. And as far as we know at the tax appeal tribunal, or let me even leave tax as a tax attorney, I know that the first level of application of the rule of law is even within the administrative competence of the tax authority. And that is where, you have the issue of objection.
Yes.
Of course, a taxpayer can always object to an assessment. And even in the conduct of that, I will presume also that the rule of law must prevail in the way and manner the tax authority deals, with the issue of, objection. There must be fair hearing. And that is why Section 69, and I'm using Nigerian law, Section 69, has its own procedure. You must file the objection within a period of time. Then, if you don't within that period, the law allows that the tax authority can also extend that period for you. The whole idea is so that you can have, fair hearing. And that is also an aspect of the rule of law. Of course, we have some lacuna. I know that the law does not prescribe a period within which the tax authority must respond to your objection. But of course, in the celebrated case of Ohando Trading and Supply Limited, the Tax Appeal Tribunal bridged the gap when it stated that, it will be taken that a tax authorities, in fact, it lays down a principle that 90 days will be taken as a reasonable time within which the tax authority must respond to an objection. our law does not provide for that. But the tax appeal tribunal came in that respect and stated that you have 90 days, tax authority has 90 days within which it should respond to an objection, failing which the taxpayer then may appeal to the tax appeal tribunal. So you can see that, even at that level, we have the application of the rule of law. And then even, appealing to the tax appeal tribunal, also, you have 30 days within which you should do that. If you don't do it within the 30 days, you can also always ask for an extension of time within which to do that, which usually the tribunal will give once you are able to provide, we give good grounds for that. And I think this is something that has universal application because the whole idea is that justice should be seen to be done, not just done, but it must be seen to have been done. So we provide all of that. I mean, within the parameter of our laws in Nigeria.
Thank you so very much. And I'll pick on one thing you said, and I'll run with that for my next question. I know you mentioned that a large part of tax enforcement procedures are administrative in nature. And as such, I'll be asking Matiana if she thinks that there could be a bit of this abuse of discretion with that administrative procedure. Could there be abuse because it could be a bit discretionary in enforcement procedures which are administrative?
Thank you, Ederin-Sola. So if I try to look at mirroring with Indonesian tax law, we do have administrative procedure for the degree of mistake that is not it's not a crime, but for crime we also have different degrees for the level of the crime itself. So in terms of administrative, I think if we set it clearly in our tax legislation, which administrative mistake that will be sanctioned with some certain degrees of administrative sanctions, I think it's not going to be a problem. But I think we have to start it from, yes, of course, how the tax legislation itself define the administrative mistakes or the sanctions accordingly. Because in my country, in our tax legislation, we do have different sanctions for different how do you go wrongdoings, and it's very clear. So there is less what we call it the judgment that you are worried about will be subjective. I think we can try to make it to the very minimum, because it's very clear in our tax regulation how we conduct with certain wrongdoings. Thank you.
I don't know if John would have anything to say as regards this. John, would you have anything to say as regards this?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I just want to add a little bit on the need to have like to limit discretion, or to have like a fair law that works both for the tax authority and the taxpayer. I'll give an example that I know a number of countries now, they have tax appeals tribunal, or for example, there's a situation where sometimes maybe when a taxpayer delays to pay a tax or something, there'll be penalties. Or when a taxpayer has not paid tax on time, or any other tax, but when it comes to refund, you find that the governments, they take time to refund, and taxpayer is not given with interest, because when you're there, you are penalized with interest. So I believe one area that needs to make sure that there's fair and there's no discretion is where you are treating taxpayers and tax authority fairly, that there's balance. If, for example, you are giving you are charging someone for delay of tax with interest, if there's a delay in refunding, then you have to consider that you have to refund taxpayer with interest. So that's one area which I see that a number of jurisdictions, they are moving to make sure that they in a way also trying to say that, okay, the taxpayers also, they have a right. We have to treat them fairly. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to add. Thank you.
I'll be moving on to Keith, and I'll be asking you as regards your what you think of the tax ombudsman. Do you think we need an independent tax ombudsman to be able to regulate some of these issues we're talking about?
Thank you. I think that is actually an excellent idea. For example, several countries, for example, the UK, they have an Office of Tax Simplification. And I think an independent ombudsman provides a very clear role, but I think his role needs to be clarified with several policies and processes in place of when and how he interacts as the ombudsman, and his resource should be widely available, because if that office is not used, if his or her expertise is not used, I think that would not be the best practice going forward. But yes, I would have an independent ombudsman. I think that's an excellent idea. They can provide some insight and maybe a different set of eyes and different ideas as a way of moderating issues or clearing issues timely.
Okay, thank you for that. I would also take you up on the next question, which has to do with data protection and confidentiality. So there's been this dichotomy, or it's been difficult to strike a balance as to, because you have some jurisdictions where if there's a tax offender, his information is made public, everybody's made to know that this person is in default of his taxes. What's your take on the need to balance confidentiality with the enforcement?
No, I think, yeah, thank you. Now, I think sort of naming and shaming taxpayers or in breach of the rules, I think those rules need to be enforced and strengthened. So I think the employees of the administration should have individual confidentiality provisions that everyone signs. There should be rules into how taxpayer data is collected, who has access to that, and various levels of authorization of sending or receiving that data to others, whether it's other countries with the automatic exchange of information or to others that request it. And most importantly, there should be a firm set of rules on publicizing any of that or preventing that publication, because that does erode the public trust, and I think mutuality provisions. So I think there does need to be consequences for that instance, and that should be enforced and published as to how you remedy that particular situation to enable that trust going forward.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I completely agree with you as regards the need to protect trust and ensure that there's trust in the system. I saw Mr. Lanray nodding, so I don't know if you have anything to say to add to the data protection regime.
Yeah. In Nigeria, for instance, you find that there's a right, to privacy. And you have a tax authority that is desirous of gathering information so as to block certain leakages, and then to ensure that we do not have, tax avoidance. And so you want to balance the right of a person's right to his private information against that. Of course, we have a data, we have a regulation in Nigeria that deals with issue of data that regulates it. We have that one. But my own challenge is because when Kate started, he talked about naming and shaming, and I know that it has been suggested in Nigeria at some forum that government should do naming and shaming. So the question is, when you look at Nigerian constitution, you look at our data regulation, does that give the tax authority the powers to do that? So because we are we have to balance this, right? Yes, there is a need, to ensure that you have information. Of course, the tax laws gives plenary powers to the tax authorities, to gather, information. But then there must be some way that we manage the information in such a way that we do not, run foul of the constitutional provision. Of course, the Constitution says that, any law that is made, that is justifiable in a democratic state will, afford a defense to derogation from that right to, right, to privacy. So the question, and that's the question I'm asking, naming and shaming, is it necessary in a democratic, setting? I don't think I agree with that. I think we may have to find other ways, of dealing with issues of, data gathering and what we do, especially with those information that we have. I know that the FIRS, that the Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act, I think it has a provision in it which penalizes any tax official which uses information, obtained in the course of his duty for other purposes, because there is always that tendency that we may blur the line between applying, using data gathered for tax purposes for other kind of purposes. And that abuse is very prevalent in Nigeria. And I'll give you a practical example. Your mobile service provider, they just supply your information to anybody, and every day you receive unsolicited, messages from all manner of places. And then you begin to wonder, how do they have access to your information? So you find that there seem to be some people also who are, underground selling information here and there, and that can be very dangerous. So I agree, yes, we must balance it. There must be some way of ensuring that, data is managed properly. But personally, I do not agree or subscribe to the issue of naming and shaming. I think, we should find a better way of doing it.
I'm not sure anybody particularly agrees with the concept of naming and shaming, and that's why we're trying to bring this topic to the fore and actually stress the need to ensure confidentiality of taxpayer information. So right now, the next thing we'll be talking about is taxpayer engagement and sensitization. There's still some people who don't know the various types of taxes, what is applicable to them, what they're supposed to be paying. And so there still needs to be a lot of engagement and sensitization initiatives. So I'll move on to John, and I'll just ask you what you think can be done to improve sensitization. Since you've had a lot of experience in various African jurisdictions and you've done research across African jurisdictions, what do you think we can do better to sensitize and create awareness?
Thank you very much, Denisola. I think in terms of the taxpayer engagements, I know that a number of countries, have been trying to engage taxpayers through maybe workshops. The others have taxpayer weeks. Others have created ways of how they can, assist taxpayers. And now, maybe thanks to technology, other jurisdictions, they have Twitter accounts. They share information about tax. They remind taxpayers about payment deadlines, and also that through technology they're able to interact with the taxpayers. But more recently, I have seen that some jurisdictions, they have created what we call call centers, where as a taxpayer can call and find out about their tax obligations. But over and above this, I think and also, like, in terms of the structure of the revenue authority, they have a taxpayer education department that continues to engage the taxpayers. But you know that in taxes, every year that changes, and the taxpayers need to be aware about their tax obligations, when they need to pay and when they need to comply. Because one of the things that has been recognized as also affecting tax compliance is that sometimes the tax laws are a bit complicated for people to understand. Even the concept of tax, people find that they're disagreeing, and how even tax assessment has been arrived. That's why, for example, have tax appeals tribunal in a number of countries. So I think the government needs to really move closer to the people. They need to have, as I said, they need to have situations where they can have established call centers. They need to have also places where they have satellite offices closer to where the people are to ease for them to comply, and also using the electronic means, and that they can have their accounts, taxpayer accounts, tax authority, where they can monitor their tax affairs. Over and above that, then they have the tax clinics where they can explain about the changes, about the tax law, about what things they need to do. I think these are some of the things that are common in the Africa jurisdiction and also in other developed countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'll move on to Mr. Ogunjem Lucy on this particular issue of taxpayer engagement. And I'd ask that why is taxpayer engagement so difficult? Because still keep complaining. It's on a regular, people don't know, there's still confusion as to the concept of taxation. So why do you think it's so difficult, and how can we make it easier to aid compliance?
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. Actually, we say that I will agree with you that it's somehow difficult because taxpayer in the first instance, they are having the willingness to even pay tax is not there in the first instance. So no matter how you try to engage them, they still pretend as if they are not having the information. I had the opportunity of speaking at one of the forum some days back, and what they brought up, by the time I started talking about it, they said they never knew that it was like that. Yes, here in Nigeria, we have even gone beyond the talking to the taxpayer. Presently, we are even going far to the secondary school and to university to let them to create the awareness right from when they are at the younger age. I know in those days, when we were still in primary school, we had something we call civic studies. In the civic study, we were taught about taxation, and you have the awareness in the mind of our mind then that you have to pay tax. So, but those ones have gone, and FRS has developed some kind of professorial chairs in universities, for instance. We have a tax debate now going on in universities and secondary school, so that they have the awareness from the beginning while they are still at the tender ages. So, but we need not to be tired. We keep going round around. We have radio jingles, we have televisions, broadcasts, we have road shows. We are doing a lot, but still, you will say that people still say that they are not aware. We need to do more. We have the major three languages in Nigeria now. We have a call center that we broadcast taxation in Yoruba, Igbo, and in Hausas. So just to make people to know, but we need not to be discouraged, we need not to be tired. We keep sensitizing and we keep talking. And also the political will from government also will help a lot. We have had situation where we have involved the primary rulers, the governors, to talk about taxation, and we are still doing more. So thank you very much.
I saw Matiana nodding her head, and I'd want to know if there's anything that we can learn from her jurisdiction. I know we have said, Mr. Ogunjem Lucy has said how they're trying to involve everybody at all levels, but I don't know if there's anything that we can learn from your jurisdiction in terms of tax awareness and engagement.
Thank you. I keep muting and unmuting my microphone. Not so familiar with the StreamYard. Well, in Indonesia, we do adopted this the strategy that was mentioned by John just now about the call center. I think we have had it for like 10 years now, and it's called Kring Pajak. So Kring means like you call, and Pajak means tax. And it's not actually just or by phone, but also on so many platforms of social media. And we also have a routine class for taxpayers that are not really engaged with social media, so they can come to a local tax office, and they could learn from our tax officers about their tax obligation and also their tax rights. We also educate not just our existing taxpayers, but also our potential taxpayers, just like what mentioned by Gabriel just now, that we go to campus, we reach them, so that these potential taxpayers, when they become taxpayers, they know how to contribute to the country. And we also have a cooperation with, I think in December 2021, it's 336 campus or university in Indonesia, across Indonesia. So we have tax centers. So if any university have a major or a program in taxation, we have a close cooperation with them, and we build and maintain a tax center where we can educate more people, not just students, to know more about taxation, and whether it's tax obligation or tax rights. So I think that's what I can share from the experience of Indonesia during SOLA. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And now, Keith, in terms of capacity building for tax administrators, what do you think can be done to build capacity for tax administrators? And do you think there's a relationship between the improving capacity building and the tax to GDP ratio?
So in Indonesia, we are also a member to Global Forum of the OECD. So we work hand in hand with them to increase our capacity as tax officials. And we also have, I think in Africa, you have Africa Initiative, where you can share more about your experience in tax transparency amongst African countries. We also are now in the middle of launching and declare one initiative in the Asian region. We learn from you and also from the South America, Latin America initiative, because one amongst programs we are proposing in this initiative is how we work together to enhance capability of our tax officials. I think it is very important, because somehow it's not just about technical or knowledge, but it is also about how you persuade, an example, or how you negotiate with taxpayers, how different communication style can actually affect the compliance of your taxpayers. So we do work not just within our organization, but also with other colleagues from different tax administrations.
Very much. Thank you so very much for that. I'll just be asking Keith if he has anything else to say and what his take is on outsourcing, because you have some jurisdictions where you have outsourcing arrangements. Should these be short, medium, or long-term plans?
Thank you. I think it really should be more short and medium term, but I think an important component of this is how these arrangements are funded, and ensuring that there are not contingency type arrangements where the provider is provided an incentive to raise issues, and without the benefit of knowing the arbitration or the final appeals later on. So I think that's primary, is how these arrangements are being funded, and that the taxpayers know how they're being funded, and also to provide various independent standards and professional standards for employing these arrangements of who is carrying out this service, and also what enforcement do they have as an outsourcer? Do they have the same rules as an employee, for example, of the tribunal or a tax administration, or do they have reduced responsibilities? So I think those are important to understand and maybe build into like a one-page sort of policies and processes of for these arrangements from a mutuality standpoint from both the taxpayer and the administration. And I think that that's really important in understanding how they're used. But in summary, I would say short and medium term, as the other parts of the tax administration system is made more efficient, maybe you will not need these, on a long-term basis.
Okay, so are there any specific areas do you believe that tax administrators should be specialized to be trained in specific industries? So, for instance, if it's the oil and gas industry, for instance, if it's the legal industry, for instance, if it's the manufacturing and FCA and fast-moving consumer goods, do you think there should be sub-specializations for tax administrators? Would that help in tax administration and
So
revenue?
I think for certain industries, very specific, such as oil and gas, yes, there should be, subject matter experts or particular issues that are just, primary used in their industries. However, for most other manufacturing entities and other industries, I would say the issues are pretty general across the board without the specificities of oil and gas or different industries like that. So I think having a general issue knowledge is paramount in applying the tax law across a range of industries. But it's difficult for tax administrators to know specifics of each and every industry. But I think of the large and specific complex industries such as oil and gas, that is important to have those issues as well known, or maybe have a special division respond to those issues.
Thank you so much, Keith. So now our final subsector, subtopic will be policy direction. And we'll be talking about the recent developments policy-wise in the international sphere. Would you have anything to share with us from your jurisdiction of practice in terms of policy developments?
Is that for myself?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I mean, apart from, what has been said, from the OECD and, policy direction, the pillars 1 and 2, very complex, different results for different jurisdictions, including in Nigeria. So I would say the impacts on compliance are tremendous, very complex to embrace these initiatives by multinationals. It's another layer onto the regular tax systems. So it is very imposing for most multinationals in terms of recent developments and these oncoming developments from a policy direction standpoint. So nothing is being replaced, but everything is being added on. So I think the complexity will take time to understand. And here, I think what's important is to make those laws and policies as simple as possible, even though they are complex. But I would try and make them as simple as possible and make them administratable, by the administration as well. And here I would engage with the taxpayers, just, have regular, business forums, workshops available so you can interact on both sides.
Thank you so much, Keith. I'll be moving on to John, and I want to ask, do you think tax policy should be a global issue or a domestic issue?
Yeah, thank you. I think it can be both ways.
Both ways. Okay.
Why I'm saying this, but I mean, generally, if you look at the domestic law that we have, the source of it, in a way, you find that it's from international law. Okay, what we see in the domestic law of a number of countries, you find that has a root international. For example, tax treaties for example, they're influencing how we design our domestic registration. So my take on this is that it should be from both ways, from the international perspective, but when we domesticate this international, there has to be suit our local realities. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we need to think about the peculiarities of each country, but we cannot isolate national regulations and international policies. I'd now be going on to Mr. Lanre because you are a lawyer, and I think this would be best answered by you. And the question goes, should states or countries consider introducing tax mediation procedures?
Well, alternative dispute resolution has gained, so much ascendancy in the couple of, years because of the inherent weaknesses that you will find with litigation. And then when you look across, fiscal jurisdictions, you will probably find that a number of such, arrangements are already in place. Even under our own arrangement, our framework actually allows for conciliation, which in a way also uh, it's a form of mediation. So that has always been there. I believe that yes, it's something that we can look at. I know it is done in the UK. They have what they call facilitated mediation in the UK. You have somebody who is qualified as a mediator, and I think usually within the service, within the UK revenue authority, who sits to mediate. So I think it's something that really we can look at, aside from the fact that it will also help to filter what eventually goes, into the tax appeal tribunal or the regular court. The cost implication and the cost effectiveness is also there. And then because of the specialist knowledge of the person who is also dealing in that, because it's going to bring that, there are levels anyway. There are level of mediation. There are instances where the mediator will only will not bring its own expertise into settlement of the dispute. It's just going to allow the parties to explore, to speak, and it will just provide guidance. But there are also some level of mediation where the mediator himself will play more like the role of an arbitrator. He will have a say in what the parties are doing. So it depends on what we want to do and what we want to achieve. So I think it's something.
Thank you so very much. I take it from you. I'm sorry to butt in, but I take it from you that you say we should look into mediation processes as ADR is ground. So I'd like to say thank you to everyone. Would have to wrap up the session because we're way beyond time. But thank you very much for all your contributions. Thank you for your time, and thank you so much for contributing to this discourse this afternoon. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you very much to our distinguished panel, and of course, Aderinsola as well, for being a very, very, very good moderator for this session. This session has been very interesting. I'm glad to have listened to a wealth of experience of almost 100 years for all our panelists put together. We have a few questions from the audience, but before we take any questions from the audience, I'll please like our panel chair, Mr. Gabriel Ogunjemilusi, to give us his closing remarks before we put an end to this panel session, sir.
Let me thank you, the moderator, or is it that is speaking? Thank you very much. Let me first of all thank the organizer of this conference. It has been a very educative and very eye-opening. I believe every participant must have gained one thing or the other from other jurisdictions. Martina from Indonesia and Kate, thank you. Mr. John, you have made a lot of contribution, which are very helpful to all the jurisdictions. Mr. Phillips, the panelist, I thank you also. Definitely, we still have a lot to do in terms of building taxpayers' paying culture in the developing world. Unlike the developed jurisdictions, we still have a lot of resistance from taxpayers because of obvious reasons that we are all aware of. I know some developed jurisdictions where taxpayers even want to pay more because they are getting almost everything free from government. There's no reason for them to hold on to their money. But down here, we know that there are a lot of things that people are still providing for themselves by themselves and for themselves. So I know by and large we are making progress day by day, and we will do more. And I believe that taxpayers also will cooperate in terms of supporting the government, the tax authority. I also speak to the tax consultants, the NGOs. All of them are expected to play their own part, so that we can also build the tax paying culture in developing world. I thank you very much, and I know another session will be willing to participate. And thank you for giving me the opportunity, even to act as the chairman of this section. I appreciate you all. God bless. Bye bye.
Thank you so much, sirs. I'll ask that our panelists please hold on. We have a few questions from participants that have been watching from across the globe. We have two questions for you, dear panel chair, Mr. Ogunjemi Lucy, and we also have one for Matiana. So please, I'll quickly read out the questions and have your response before we move on with the program, sir. Mr. Ogunjemilusi, a point here says, you've spoken about about taxpayers not being aware. Is the complexity of our tax laws in Nigeria, for example, not a factor to make awareness hard or impossible? Speaking about the complexity of the laws and the tax regime here in the country, has that been a contributory factor to taxpayers not being aware of which tax to pay to which authority, as the case may be?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think complexity in tax law, yes, it's not the idea. Tax law is supposed to be very simple and well understood. But that you are not aware of the taxes or whether taxes are to be paid is different from the complexity of tax laws. So if someone knows that there is a tax law, he knows that he has the obligation to pay, then you cannot be talking to complexity. I'm not saying that complexity of tax law does not add to the issue of difficulty in making tax payment, or it encourages tax avoidances. I can subscribe to that. But that the condition of tax laws is not making you to know that, to be aware that there is tax payment, then I don't think that one can be totally correct. You realize that yes, over some years in Nigeria, our tax law has remained static, except for recently when we started having the finance bill, of which has really helped a lot. We are trying to make it as simple as possible, but we are still thinking, we still have the room of making the holistic review of the total tax law and make it as simple as possible. Even thinking of having it in languages other than English, which we believe that will also help further. But awareness that to be aware that there's a tax paying obligation is different from the complexity in tax law. Complexity in tax law can result into aggressive tax planning, or ambiguity in tax laws may result into non-compliance, but not that one is not totally aware of the tax obligation. Thank you very much. That's what I have to say about that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ogunjemilusi, for that contribution. We have another question here for Matiana. Speaking about the examples that you gave on what is being done to ensure that taxpayers pay in Indonesia. But this person is saying, can you please share the success rates of this new approach that has been taken to tax paying, tax communication as well in Indonesia?
Okay, thank you for the question. Oh, it's a quick. So I think this is more about the steps I shared, in particular how we reach taxpayers. So there are studies, yes, that conducted about the relationship between several factors and tax compliance in Indonesia, among which are the outreach by local tax office or our assistance, online assistance by Directorate General of Taxes. However, if what you're asking is particular relationship between one factor, in example, the number of tax centers compared to its effect to the increase in tax compliance, I haven't read such studies. Probably still in the making. But if we are talking about so many factors that are affected that affect the tax compliance in Indonesia, yes, we do have several. And in terms of data, we can show that prior to our online assistance, in example, as I told you about the Kring Pajak and also other online platforms, the tax compliance in Indonesia was about the rate, I think 60% or less, but now we are about 80% in tax compliance. So I think somehow it contribute to actually how we increase the knowledge of our taxpayers, and of course at the end it affects it turns out to bring or increase the tax compliance rate in Indonesia. I think that's my answer, Darin Sola. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matiana. We hope that we can borrow a leaf from that, and as well, our tax compliance rates can increase here in Nigeria and, of course, Africa and the world as a whole. This is me officially thanking once again all our distinguished panelists for being a part of the Taxpayers Conference 2022. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your sterling contributions to this conversation. The program is going to continue now. If you're aware and you have been following us for a while, you know that this conference is just a part of a lineup of programs that we have had for this year's lineup. Earlier on, we had our global tax debate amongst different tax clubs and societies in higher institutions in Nigeria in honor of Professor Judith Friedman. And we have one of our sponsors, that's the IBFD, International Bureau of Fiscal Documentation. We have a representative of the IBFD who will be speaking to us and giving us a few goodwill words in the next couple of minutes. Please help me welcome Mr. John Mpoha, who is one of our panelists and who is a representative of the IBFD. Mr. John Mpoha, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm here, the echo, I don't know. Thank you very much once again. At IBFD, one of the, it's called Home of Taxation. It was established in 1938, actually. So we have supported or part of the tax this year's taxpayers conference, and we're able to we have provided a book that is going to that the organizers are going to use, or just an appreciation that we're supporting this conference. But just a bit of the book or the work that we do. It's under the Center for Studies in Africa Taxation. So this is one of it's our think tank in Africa in IBFD that is devoted to developing the taxation tax policy developments in Africa and make sure that we're able to contribute to the knowledge about tax systems in Africa. So we do this through a number of research studies. We partner with the organizations in Africa, scholars in Africa, to do a research, high quality research on tax policy issues in Africa and administrative issues in Africa. Apart from that, some of you may be aware that on 26 and 27 May this year, we organize what we call Africa Tax Symposium. This is one of our leading conferences that brings together our tax experts globally and with a focus on Africa. We focus on latest developments in international taxation and how they're impacting on Africa. We have heard about the Pillar 1, Pillar 2, and other developments that are going on globally and what they mean for Africa. So apart from that, we also do capacity building in a number of areas. It could be international taxation, tax treaties, it could be VAT, or any other tax issues. Because as I said, IBFD is the home of taxation. All tax issues, or anything tax, I think IBFD is involved in. So thank you very much. We are really happy to be part of this year's conference, and we wish everyone participating and also very grateful for the organizers that invited us to be part of this conference. So wish you all the best, and may God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Mr. John Poha, who's a representative of one of our sponsors, the IBFD, sponsors of the Global Tax Debate, in honor of Professor Judith Friedman. Thank you very much for your kind words and as well being part of this movement. Right now, we're about to have our second panel session for the day, our second and last panel session for the day. This particular panel is dear to my heart because I know that the media plays an important role in development in any country. The media is said to be the fourth estate of the realm, and in changing the narrative, we must engage the power of the media. The panel session we're about to have will be on the role of the media in boosting taxpayers' morale. The moderator for this session is one of my, well, would I call it a colleague now, because I'm also in the media. She's a broadcast journalist from Nigeria Info FM, Chioma Ezenwafo. Another beautiful, power-packed panel has been carefully selected to be a part of this discussion. Please welcome with me first the chair of this panel, Stephanie Johnston. Stephanie Johnston is the chief correspondent of Tax Notes Today International, whose bits include the OECD, the G20, and tax issues related to the digital economy. Stephanie was included among ICAEW's Economia 50 list of the most influential sources of finance news and information in social media for 2016 and 2018. She was also featured on International Tax Review's Global Tax 50 list of influential individuals, organizations, and geopolitical events in the tax world in 2016. She's a Canadian national and has a bachelor's degree from the University of California, Irvine, as well as a master's degree from Northwestern University Medhill School of Journalism. Please welcome with me Stephanie Johnston, who will be the chair of this panel session. We also have some distinguished panel members. We have Johannes Wojuola. Johannes Wojuola is a lawyer, a dispute resolution specialist, and a multimedia and communication expert who is passionate about good policies, social equity, and Nigeria. Johannes is also the former editor-in-chief of LOL magazine and was the publisher of Jour magazine. From 2020 to 2021, Johannes was the curator of the Abuja hub of the Global Shapers Community, an initiative of the World Economic Forum. Mr. Wojuola is the spokesperson of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS. Please welcome with me our second panelist, Mr. Johannes Wojuola. The third panelist for this session is Mr. Hamza Ali. He's an award-winning financial journalist with over 9 years of experience as a reporter covering all parts of the financial services and investments industries. In his current role, he spent his days unpacking complex tax policy as well as explaining them for a general audience. Some of the stories that he has helped break include details of the international digital tax negotiations at the OECD. He holds a master's degree in interactive journalism from City University of London. Please welcome with me Mr. Hamza Ali, who is our third panelist for this session. Last but not the least, we have Natalia Pushkareva. Natalia is the first person in her family to graduate from university and has a first degree in law from the Russian Law School. She also has a master's degree in law and finance from the University of Oxford. She studied towards a graduate degree in economics at the LSE and completed her PhD in global studies at the University of Urbino. Her academic results and research skills were marked with multiple awards, scholarships, and fellowships. For example, in 2020, the World Tax Summit included Natalia in the 35 Future Leaders of Taxation Under 35 list. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me Natalia Pushkareva. Thank you very much. Finally, please welcome with me the moderator for this session, Chioma Ezenwafo. Thank you very much for being a part of Taxpayers Conference 2022. I do believe that we will start off this session with opening remarks from the chair of the panel, Stephanie Johnston.
Great. Thank you so much to the organizers for the invitation, and I'm honored to share my thoughts about how the media influences tax morale. So I can speak from my experience working for Tax Today International, which is published by my company, Tax Analysts, and I've been a tax journalist for more than 10 years. So I have a few observations about this topic, which I hope will help shape our panel discussion to follow. But first, a little bit about my company, Tax Analysts. Tax Analysts was founded in 1970 to foster an open and informed discussion about taxes. We cover all manner of tax news, from U.S. federal and state taxes and international taxes. And our mission is to defend the public interest and force tax policymaking into the open. Since tax people love talking about pillars, I've come up with 4 to help guide our discussion today. The way I see it, the media's role in boosting tax morale is based on transparency, accountability, accuracy, and impartiality. So first, transparency. The media is crucial for ensuring transparency in tax policymaking, which in turn helps the public understand and comply with tax rules. For instance, Tax Analysts first sued the IRS in 1972 to gain public access to private letter rulings and technical advice memoranda, through which the IRS provided legal advice to specific taxpayers and IRS field agents. The courts gave us access to private letter rulings, and Congress soon required the IRS to publicly disclose its technical advice memoranda. And since then, we've used the Freedom of Information Act to force the IRS and state revenue officials to publicly share information about tax assessments and exemptions they provided in private decisions. So this leads me to my next point, accountability. Accountability and transparency often go hand in hand. The media can also exert pressure on taxpayers and governments when questionable practices come to light. For example, journalists were responsible for reporting on such leaks as the Panama Papers and Luxembourg leaks, which led to greater transparency and information exchange in tax matters and beneficial ownership information. Journalists are also key in reporting on corporate tax affairs, which has led to such reforms as the OECD Base Erosion and Profit Shifting Project and the current 2-pillar Global Tax Reform Project to address the tax challenges of the digitalization of the economy. So that brings me to accuracy. As noted, I went to Northwestern University Medill School of Journalism, and whenever we would submit an article as an assignment, we would get an automatic fail if it contained an error, even the smallest error. You could have the most cogent, well-reported, Pulitzer Prize-winning article, but if it had the wrong date or misspelled name, you get the dreaded, what we call the Medill F. And it drove the point home that accuracy is a journalist's currency. Accuracy in our reporting is also crucial in shaping tax morale. One mistake, one misreported article, one sensationalist story could have a ripple effect in the public's understanding of how tax rules really work. And that in turn could lead to bad tax policy. And we in Tax Notes, and I hope others in the media, always strive to report the facts, the correct facts. And along with this is impartiality. Even though we do play a part in boosting tax morale, journalists must always exercise impartiality when reporting the news so that the media is not weaponized for politics' sake. That would undermine our credibility, and when that happens, public trust erodes, and public trust is a cornerstone of tax morale. So those are just a few of my thoughts, just to get the conversation started. Thank you very much again for inviting me to be the chair of the panel, and I really do look forward to further discussion, especially across the world, because this topic would be different all over the world in different parts. So I'm looking forward to everyone's thoughts on this matter.
All right.
Thank you. Okay. I suppose I'm going to, do I carry on and get the conversation started, or is that what would you like to do? Would anyone like to comment on maybe some of these thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would reiterate everything you said. I do think like the important thing to sort of remember with like sort of journalists is that is the impartiality piece, I think, because with a lot of, well, for me at least, I think, because there are, the way tax often works is that there are two sides to a lot of these debates, the taxpayer and the tax authority, and they both have skin in the game. So I think the sort of role of an impartial third party to sort of describe what the policy is and what its sort of possible outcomes are is, I think, important for democracy in the sense that good sort of democratic outcomes require sort of journalism to give information to the voting public. So if I'm going to vote for a politician who's saying, you know, we should have tax cuts, we should know what the policy outcomes are and have somebody who doesn't have skin in the game describing to you what they are. But yeah,
absolutely. Natalia, I saw you were nodding along.
Yes, I did nod along indeed. I agree completely with both of you, and I would like to stress, I think, the part, like the way I see it, the role of journalism in enhancing tax morale is actually dealing with the problem of information asymmetry between the taxpayer and the tax authority, because it is often the case that these two sides have incomplete information about what the other side is doing. Like the tax authorities probably do not know how many people are not complying, and companies, of course, you know, and how they are avoiding taxes, and they would like to know that. And taxpayers are not quite sure about what the government is doing with their money they paid in taxes. And that kind of erodes the social contract between the two sides, which is the basis of, you know, tax morale and your desire to comply with tax legislation in the first place, I think. And here is where we really need tax journalists to kind of fill in the gaps and provide both sides with better information about each other's actions, so we can make better informed decisions. And as someone with a little bit of a research background, I did my homework and I did look up the correlation between tax morale and the way that tax policy is covered in media. And there is indeed a positive correlation between, like, if the taxpayer is going to see that tax legislation and the actions of the government are covered in media in a positive, constructive way, if they kind of feel like they internally approve where their money go, they are, of course, more likely to comply with the legislation and pay their taxes. And the opposite is also true, of course. If they see from the news that the government is corrupted, inefficient, and investing their revenues in initiatives that are not likely to benefit themselves, then it really affects their tax morale negatively. So that's a proven fact. Not that we doubted that, but there is a research on that. So yeah, I think journalism has a crucial role here to play by informing both parties and filling the gaps in their knowledge about each other's actions.
Okay, thank you so much, Natalia, and thank you, Stephanie. I hope you can hear me loud and clear now. Apologies, I had an internet, I was disconnected there. Okay, I was actually able to listen to what you said while I was battling that internet. And I would like to talk about perception about tax compliance. What's your view? I'm asking Johannes now, Johannes Oluwatobi. What's your view? How, in your view, has media shaped taxpayers' perceptions about tax compliance, and why?
I think if I get you correct, it's how has the media shaped tax compliance, right?
Taxpayers' perception
Or
of tax compliance.
taxpayers compliance. I
Perception
the perception
about tax compliance. Yes, how
about
they
tax
perceive
compliance.
tax compliance.
Okay. For me, I think I don't think the media has done as much as we want, and not to cast aspersion on the media, but it perhaps seems that there is so much to be done in terms of bridging the communication gap between the taxpayers and of course the authorities, and that is because of the more or less the tripod by which this conversation is underpinned, and it's the tripod of the taxpayer, democracy, and the media. And when you the intersection between these three is such that there's a social contract between the government and the governed, and it's like a transaction between two people. You would want to honor the terms of your transaction when you get the best value for your money. So the taxpayer is asking himself and asking herself, am I getting the best value for my money? And that question, the truth is that has that question been answered by both the government and the media? Because the media, in every sense, and I think Choma had said something about that earlier. The media being a fourth estate of the realm, right? The media is a part of the government of governance by itself, but it plays a more or less a neutral role between the citizens and the government. So how has the media been able to more or less bridge this communication gap where the citizens are asking the questions saying, do we see what we pay our taxes for? And on the other hand, we have the government saying you're not paying enough taxes to get the services you think you want. Uh, Both parties in this conversation, that is the governed and the government, are, are looking for a platform or need a platform to have a healthy debate and to be
Okay.
able to see things from each other's perspective. And that's where perception comes in. The question now is how much has been done on this? I would say so much has been done, but yet it seems so little because so much needs to be done. Citizens need to see more of what government is doing from the government's perspective, because government's perspective is always different from what the citizen's perspective is. Government is saying we have $1 million, but then we need to share this around our 36 states. We need to fund salaries. We need to build roads. We need to prioritize on some of our obligations. We need to pay salaries. So government has its own excuses for why it seems the money is not enough, and the
Okay.
taxpayer equally feels that it's not. I'm not getting the best for my services. But there's the need to create a healthy platform, and which is the role of the media for both parties to see each other, perception again, to see each other from each other's perspective. The taxpayer saying that government is doing enough, and for government to even meet my obligations, I must be a compliant taxpayer, and government needs to be able to show that the roads that are being built, the hospitals that are being put in place, the schools, the public schools that are being put in place, the even the foreign relations that Nigerian citizens enjoy outside the country are products of the taxes we pay. So that perception is a work in progress, if I would say. The media still has so
Okay.
much to do in that regard.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. And that brings me to Hamza. Hamza, talk to us about the exact responsibility the media has in encouraging tax compliance. Because from what he said, it appears there's so much. Is it clear? What are they?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I tend to agree with Johannes that there's a lot to do. I think it's a very difficult job to be able to explain to everybody in a way they can understand something as complicated as tax policy. And it's not just that it's complicated to explain, it's that often it's subjective. So, you draw the line here, I draw the line there, and then we have a legal battle about, what counts. And then there's a third element of it, which is there's a difference between what is legally required and what somebody else thinks is fair. And then this whole sort of debate about what is fair and what's not fair is again incredibly subjective sort of debate. And I think through all of that, a journalist's role has to be able to be impartial whilst also taking into account all these sort of disparate and often pulling in different directions factors. Now, all that being said, I think it's an important role in sort of trying to help people have informed debates about the reality of tax policy in a country. I mean, I can sort of speak to the difficulties I've had sort of covering international tax policy, that people have differing opinions, they have reasons for their differing opinions, and you have to sort of take a neutral position, because everybody needs to be informed about what everybody else is doing. So to sort of Johannes's point, yes, the general public needs to be informed, but corporations also need to know what governments are doing. Governments also need to know what corporations are doing. So as a sort of a neutral party informing everybody, I think it's a mammoth task. It's not a it's sort of easy task.
I'm wondering, when you look at the shall I say, the parameters available for the media to be able to carry out this role, would you say it's been open enough? I mean, as a media practitioner yourself, as a journalist yourself, would you say it's been open enough to allow for adequate reporting for both sides to, see that tax compliance is working or it's happening?
I mean, yes. I think if you go back 10, 20 years ago, the general public weren't really talking or really understanding tax policy. You weren't seeing in the Financial Times people talking about tax policy. Like it wasn't going on the front page. But like now it's become pretty central. Every year at the financial sort of reporting deadlines of the big, sort of tech groups, you see headlines about how they're not paying their fair share. And it's because the narrative on taxation and everyone's opinion about taxation has dramatically changed because of the role of the media. And I think the importance.
So there's access to information, and the average journalist has.
Yeah. It's become a more central part of people's policy understanding. I think it's no longer sort of a dry subject that's only occasionally talked about. It's now pretty central. I think the sort of COVID-19 pandemic has sort of highlighted that tax policy is just like any other policy. It's important economic policy. Often it's sort of driving other changes in our society. And I think people are, I guess, if not in a position where they know everything, they're better informed, which is, I think, the crux of the question that you're asking.
Okay, thank you there, Hamza. I'm going to come to you now, Stephanie. Can you talk to us about the organization's, what you've done to encourage tax morale? But let's begin with what you think. Where are we when it comes to tax morale? Is it high or is it low? And what's your organization done to encourage it, to improve it?
So I guess maybe a note about our audience is mostly policymakers, practitioners make up a large part of our audience. So we serve to provide accurate information and up-to-date, information to help these practitioners and top policymakers kind of make informed decisions about how to help their clients, comply with tax morale with their tax returns or tax obligations, governments to see what the other side is talking about, and trends that are emerging, and problems that are within legislation that they've drafted. So we try to have, we are subscription based, but we do have free resources that we give to, that's open to everybody. We have a special research tool that has, basically all of the IRS, the tax code, and all just tons of resources for anybody really who wants to access them. We've got the feature news we highlight important issues of the day. And popular information. And we also have a transfer pricing center, which is a center for, has the most up-to-date, guidance from the IRS, judgments, and, and basically anything you need to know if you're a transfer pricing professional, to help your clients, to advise your clients, and I think there is among our audience, I'd like to think our audience is very keen on complying with tax law and helping others comply as well. So I think that's a core part of our mission, to just get as much information out there as possible that professionals can use, mostly to make sure that their clients are on the up and up. So that is what we do.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Natalia, talk to us about your organization. What's been done to encourage tax morale? And before you answer that, just talk to us about whether it's a high morale or low one from your angle.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. So I'm employed by United Nations Development Program, and I really don't think I'm authorized to speak on behalf of the UN.
Okay.
But I sincerely hope that what we do does help to improve tax morale in the countries where we work. But building on the previous conversation, I wanted to highlight something very important to me, because I think tax journalism has not only power to cover tax policy, but actually to move it forward and to help update tax policies. Because, for example, if we didn't know how little multinational corporations paid in tax, there wouldn't be this social demand for change. When you realize that Starbucks didn't pay any taxes at all in the UK for like 10, 15 years, or Amazon paid less taxes than your grandma did, you just feel strongly that this is unfair. It is just very hard to justify based on someone's ability to pay, because ability to pay of Amazon is very different from ability to pay of my grandmother, for example. And I think this was the moment where many policymakers realized that this change is unstoppable, that people will find out about this and people will not be comfortable with this. And there will be social pressure from civil society organizations, from people everywhere, to change the way that tax policy works. And I think because it took so much space in the news several years ago, we had the BEPS project, and now we have Pillar 2 and Pillar 1 going on, and we have this discussion open about how can we reform the global system of international taxation in a way that work better for especially marginalized groups and lower income countries, etc., and that is perceived as a fairer system than the one that we used to have, which was not quite working for this new economic reality we live in. And I do think that, if it wasn't for media, the change either wouldn't happen for some time or would happen much, much slower, because it was media that caused street protests, where people actually took to the streets and showed how uncomfortable they are and how unjust they perceive these tax policies. And I think it really, really stimulated the change, even at huge international policy fora such as the OECD, for example, which is really impressive. I think it's a key impact that anyone had in this situation. So yeah, I think I just saw that it's important to reflect on that about on how covering some new findings about how tax policy works in practice, whether they come from private investigations carried out by journalists or maybe even academic research in some cases, can be really important for keeping the tax policy updated and adequate to our realities and what we feel is fair or just to some extent, at least.
Okay, thank you so much, Natalia. I'm going to come to you now, Johannes. And when we talk about tax morale, what your organization done to encourage tax morale? And before you answer that, of course, I would like to also get what you think about the current level of that morale. Is it high or low? And then share what you've done to encourage it. You have to unmute. Yes.
Oh yeah, I'm on mute. I'm unmuted right now. I think it's important we ask the first question is why should a taxpayer pay taxes? I think that defines the morale question. That is the foundation of the morale question. You get excited to pay for something because you get something in return. Uh, Taxed, the joy of tax. Very interesting book. I think Richard Murphy, if I remember the author. Uh, it's a whole conversation of is there really something good about paying taxes? Do you feel happy when you go or when you're a taxpayer as a corporation to let off in Nigeria 30% of your profits and give back to government? So why should I do that? Why can't I keep the wood tight to myself? And so the reason a taxpayer wants to let off or will come conveniently, may not be joyfully, but conveniently or comfortably let off that chunk of their earnings is because they're expecting something in return. You're expecting better security. You're expecting better roads. You're expecting healthcare, affordable healthcare. You're expecting qualitative education. Now, is the taxpayer getting that? That's a very big question, and it's subjective as well. And but I would speak as if I were just an ordinary citizen, and as if I were conducting a vox pop. I will tell you that most taxpayers do not feel they're getting enough on one hand, and that in itself perhaps answers the question of tax compliance morale, because when you see what you're getting, you're happily paying for what you're getting. So that is on one hand. On another hand is the issue of convenience and ease of tax paying. Uh, a taxpayer wants to sit at the comfort of his home, and just like we have today, I'm here at home. I want a pizza. I will get a pizza. I want anything. I will get it literally by making an order by my mobile phone. That comfort is what the taxpayer wants to enjoy. That he gets a notification on his billing or his assessment, and from the comfort of his office or the comfort of his home, he can pay his taxes from there. And so, on our own part at the Federal Inland Revenue Service, we've looked at we have one of our well I say our of one of the 4-point agenda of our executive chairman is making the service a customer centric service. That is, let's put the taxpayer first. Let's really make the taxpayer king. Let the taxpayer enjoy paying their taxes. Of course, it's not easy to let off hard earned resources, but then at least let them feel happy doing so. And what have we done? One of the things we have done is establish a contact center. It's able to take questions or take inquiries from taxpayers in 6 different languages. Hausa, the 3 major languages in Nigeria: Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, English, French, Arabic. We're not yet with Russian, but we'll get there someday, Natalia. So those major languages are being covered. So a taxpayer, whether being a foreign, being a non-resident taxpayer, can call in, make inquiries. A resident taxpayer can call in, make inquiries. This is my issue. These are the challenges I'm facing. Secondly, and quite very critically to what our making, the life of the taxpayer more easier and helping the compliance rate, is we have set up the Tax Pro Max, where, or will I say, we have a homegrown tax administration solution. It's called the Tax Pro Max. Now, the Tax Pro Max allows a taxpayer to just log in online. You can Google it if you want to do that right now, and log in to Tax Pro Max to register to pay your taxes, and to apply for your tax clearance certificate and validate it as well. So we have more or less made the three most important things to a taxpayer. We brought it to his doorstep. So as I'm sitting right now in my home, I can do all my filings. I can file my returns online. I can pay my taxes online. I can apply for a tax clearance certificate, which I need to transact other businesses online. So we have that in itself has created or has built a bridge between the taxpayer and the tax authority, to make life more easy for them and ease compliance. I would also say that we have also improved our stakeholder engagement.
Okay.
We're hosting a lot of webinars right now, and of course, kudos to persons like to the tax house and many other institutions in pushing for conversations in tax engagement. But we're improving our engagement with taxpayers, having on trivial issues that we as tax authorities may seem trivial, may look as trivial, but may be quite very cogent to the taxpayer. We're hosting conversations around them. How to use what compliance tools are we using? We're answering those questions in our webinars. How to use the Tax Pro Max. Oh, there is a new Finance Act that is out. What are the questions that you have as taxpayers that you have for us? We're answering those questions. We're trying as much as possible to improve our social media engagements, which is the new house, is the new conversation place. People want to just sit down with their on Twitter and ask a question to the tax authority. I can't pay my taxes. Why? We want to make sure that we're able to give those answers in real time and as quick as possible. All inquiries are made and answered, and improve on our tax education as well. Currently, we this year, the commencement of this year, we started a partnership with about 5 media houses. For Nigerians, you know the National Television Authority, the African Independent Television, TVC, then the Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria. So we're partnering with them to improve taxpayer education. So almost every now and then we have one program or the other. We're explaining things. They call in. We tell them, okay, these are the questions you have. These are the answers to your questions. We have some of the specialists in-house go out there to speak with them. Also, we have self-service stations which we have set up in all our tax offices for taxpayers to simply just walk in, do whatever tax transactions they want to do. It's like a system there. Do whatever you want to do, and if you have a need for any assistance, we would have a staff who would help you do that. So generally, what we're trying to do is, how can we make your life easy? At least as a tax authority, being that we're not the government, we can't determine whether roads are built. We can't determine whether health facilities are built, whether schools are built. But on our own part, being the tax authority, how can we make life more easier for the taxpayer? These are the areas we're looking at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Johannes. I mean, so much is being done from what we are saying. But so it gets me thinking about the various kind of media that we have. You mentioned already that you're using the broadcast media. How about the print media? How much of that is being engaged when it comes
Yes,
to
I think
encouraging?
permit me to just I didn't mention that. So we have a partnership with about 10 newspapers right now. Off the Cuff, Guardian, This Day, Nation, Leadership, Al Jazeera, um, Tribune, all major newspapers, we have a partnership with them for a special tax page on a monthly basis. And our partnership with these houses, with these newspaper houses, is we are not going to tell you what to write. We want you to conduct research and educate the public. But then, if you need any information, reach out to us. If you need to interview any of our staff, any of our experts in house, we're ready to give you those inroads to be able to do that. So every month, you catch on the Leadership newspaper, on Nation newspaper, on Guardian newspaper, on Tribune newspaper. Every month there's a special tax page that is dedicated to talking about one issue or the other around taxes, and especially contemporaneous tax issues that are ongoing. The conversations are ongoing. So yes, indeed, we're covering the print.
Okay, now talking about, you just mentioned that you don't tell them what to report regarding tax and tax payment, and that brings me to you, Hamza Ali. When you talk about what they've been saying, what organizations are doing to boost tax morale, and you think of the role of the media or the journalists now, supposedly, are you worried about transparency, impartiality, accuracy? I mean, Stephanie has talked about how important it is that we are accurate when reporting about taxation. And do you think there's a training needed, okay, in line with being very transparent, even though it's a partnership with? I mean, he just talked about partnership. Do you think there's need for training of the media professionals so that we protect transparency, impartiality, accuracy in reporting taxation?
So I think this is a bit of a tricky question, but it has really underlying sort of challenge. On the one side, inaccuracy and let's say a misunderstanding of tax policy can lead to sort of coverage that is damaging to tax morale. For example, I think a lot of reporting around how much corporations pay in tax don't take into account things like fundamental designs of our tax system to take account of how much losses they make, and they're allowed to be able to use losses to offset taxes in most jurisdictions, and they don't have to be doing anything naughty or tricky to to take advantage of this. It's really difficult to sort of communicate that when you look at absolute figures. Here's how much tax they paid, and here's how much profit, like revenue, they made. And like, not to get too sort of into the weeds on this one, because corporations do go out of their way to definitely try and minimize their tax bills. But let's say a large chunk of that is losses for a lot of companies. But a lot of tax journalists will know this, but general financial journalists will not know this. And this is a education gap, let's say. So on the one hand, I think to improve accuracy of tax policy coverage, I think training would be good. But I think if you require a special tax qualified journalist to report on tax, I think it would diminish access. I think a better goal would be to improve understanding of general taxation in general. I think for both the population and for journalists, rather than to sort of require that they become tax experts in order to write about it, which means we should come down. We should come down from the mountain rather than climb up the mountain, if that makes sense. That being said, I do see the challenge underneath it, because if we as tax journalists have to sort of rely on experts to educate policy, we sort of fall into the trap of they get to describe the terms of the debate, and that can be damaging to how we cover something that's sort of incredibly important.
Okay, now, of course, this is Taxpayers Conference 2022, and we're talking boosting taxpayers' morale globally, our role. That's the media. we've been having conversations with eggheads within the media space when it comes to taxation, and a lot has been said. We've talked about transparency, and of course, the fact that the media has played a role that's brought about tax reforms. I mean, whenever I go to Johannes Oluwatobi, he spends a lot of time talking about what his organization is doing to boost tax morale. And I mean, so this is your cue. If you have questions for any of the panelists, or you have general comments, you can just drop it, and we look forward to, reading it. I look forward to sharing it. So if you have questions, you have thoughts. Okay, I see one from here, Akinlo Lua Akin Rinde. He says, thank you, Mr. Ioannis, awesome session. And then another one here from Bola Ahmed. It says, please, what are the various dates and which newspaper does FIRS make their publications in educating the public? He mentioned it earlier, but I'm just going to still allow Mr. Johannes to talk about it. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bola Ahmed, for your question. Please, what are the various dates and which newspapers? So I can't list out the various newspapers because there are quite a number of them. Daily Assets, Guardian newspaper, Nation newspaper, Leadership newspaper, This Day newspaper, Business Day newspaper. But I can tell you that the major newspapers in Nigeria all publish a special tax page. Now, coming back to the dates of publication, because what we try to established with them is sort of a partnership, not a dictatorship, where we pay for a page on a newspaper and tell you what to publish. The engagement with them is, please, in the spirit of educating the public, can you have a special tax page? We will sponsor it to a tune, not of course like an advertisement, but then take ownership of the page. Publish it on a date you want to publish it. Have a dedicated reporter that does the research and does everything. If you have any questions, these are our tax experts. They are available to educate you on the issues or any knotty issues, knowing that taxation is a technical subject matter. But we don't determine the dates they publish. So you can have business days publishing in the first week of the month. Nation is publishing on the second. Al Jazeera is publishing on the third. So it's left at their free will and not at ours. But it's a thing that you see as quite often as possible. And the beauty of it is that whichever newspaper you're turning, you're likely having a page that talks about one issue or the other. But mind you that this is just one aspect of engagement. It's not like it's not even the one-way street engagement. We're engaging in multiple ways with the print. We also have articles that we're making sure that are written by some of our tax experts in-house on some of the topical issues. I know that recently we did something on education tax, which is quite one of the most interesting taxes that taxpayers can actually see the evidence of that tax they pay. And if I have just 30 seconds to just add to what that education tax is, it's the tax that is administered by or that's managed by the TET fund. And if you go across almost every Nigerian public institution, public tertiary institution, there's a TET fund project in each one of them. And that is funded by the 2.5% of companies' assessable profit, which is paid as education tax. So there's a direct correlation between that tax and the benefit the taxpayers can see. I'm sorry that I had to just do a little bit of diversifying there, but I hope that answers your question, Ola.
Stephanie, you want to add something to what you shared?
Well, I guess maybe that sort of brings to mind a question. You talk about print in different kinds of media that first engages with. Makes me wonder. What is most effective channel for this for boosting tax morale, and does print have more of a value, I guess, or more influence than say TV or broadcast media? You mentioned social media. Social media is, you can't communicate without it, as much as we have a love-hate relationship with it sometimes. So, with the digital age, especially, I mean, online media is also very important. But that makes me wonder, actually made me wonder about, maybe Natalia had some thoughts about this because of your research, but I think that there is also maybe different forms of media, because we're not homogenous. Like there are many forms of media, and their effectiveness can vary depending on where you are in the world and what your communities and your audience use most often. So I think that's also very important. And so, well, I guess I'm just rambling, but there's another point I wanted to mention about the training. So when I came to this job, I had no training whatsoever. I was a fashion journalist, no zero experience at all. So I did rely on we do, as Hamza said, like we do rely on sources to kind of explain some of the text concepts that we are not familiar with, and we distill that into plain language for a general audience. But I do know that I do know that tax administrations, like as you mentioned, what you're doing at first, that the African Tax Administration Forum, I see that they hold regular tax journalism trainings, which I think it's very useful. And I wonder, I think there is space there to do more in regional tax organizations holding these kinds of workshops for the journalists in their locations. I think that would be really helpful as well. And anyway, so I'm just rambling, but I really am curious about this question about media's different types of media and their influence.
Okay, before we wrap up, I'm going to have to get back to you, Stephanie, for a closing remark. But then I would like to hear what Hamza Ali has to say. When you look at effectiveness, what media do you think is more effective as we wrap up?
Do you want me to go first, or I guess Stephanie can go, so I'll go first. Yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult one. I know that we do a podcast, for example, that's quite effective at sort of when you need to have a conversation about something, and it's much clearer to be able to sort of go back and forth about all the sides of something. It's a nice way to do, maybe not breaking news or a deep piece of analysis that has, lots of different graphs in it and lots of different structures and stuff like that. So I think it depends on what it is you're doing and what you want your audience to leave with, is I think the short answer.
Okay, all right.
Yes, do that.
Okay, Stephanie, please give us about 2 minutes of closing
Sure.
remarks.
Yeah, I really didn't write anything to close out. I just wanted to absorb what everyone else is saying during the conversation. I think, as Johannes mentioned, like there's so much more to do. With great power comes a great responsibility, and that's something we all journalists should always keep in mind, and tax authorities should keep in mind. We do have this great power to influence change in the world, in tax policy. So we should use it responsibly, use it accurately, and effectively. I think we had a great conversation here about, a lot of food for thought, I think, for other journalists and, policymakers, academics. I mean, everybody who's got some interest in shaping tax policy. So a very fruitful conversation. I really appreciate everyone's comments and the invitation to share our thoughts and just converse about, debate about this very important topic. And thank you, Shioma, for great moderation. And I know how I've been moderating before, and I know it's a hard job, so I really appreciate that. So really, really thankful for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Hamza. Thank you, Anis, for sharing all of that information. And yes, we've been talking role of media in boosting taxpayers' morale. And I do hope what we shared here today is going to actually boost more taxpayers' morale going forward. Okay, so it's still Taxpayers Conference 2022, and I'll be stepping aside now and handing over to Damilola Busari. Thank you very much.
A very big thank you. Thank you so much, Chioma, for moderating that discussion. It was very insightful to hear thoughts from Stephanie, from Mohammed, from Mr. Ali, and of course from Johannes as well. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on what the media can do. Particularly instructive for me was the issue of transparency, accountability, and impartiality, especially when reporting issues that have to do with tax compliance, so that the media is not wrongly weaponized by agents. Thank you very much for being a part of Taxpayers Conference 2022, Boosting Taxpayers' Morale, Our Role. It's a wrap on today's edition of the conference. It's time for us to draw the curtain. But before we do that, please note that today is just the start. It's a 2-day conference. We have had 2 insightful panel sessions today. We have also had our keynote speaker, Mr. Ati, speak to us, and I'll let you know that tomorrow we're also going to be having a guest speaker. We're also going to have 3 panel sessions tomorrow, 12 p.m. West African time. Please ensure that you're here on our YouTube channel, Tax House on YouTube, ready to catch the live stream. Tomorrow, just to give you some sort of sneak peek into what will be happening tomorrow, we have tax and technology, disruption, challenges, and solutions. That will be our first panel session tomorrow. We also have the role of tax clubs in boosting taxpayers' morale. So that's going to be a breakout session where we have different representatives of tax clubs in higher institutions here in Nigeria speak to us on this topic. The last panel session for the conference will be on what taxpayers want. You and I put our money out, ensuring that we're good citizens by paying our taxes. So we have a chance to air our views and say, this is what we hope that the government and stakeholders take into consideration in appropriating the taxes that are paid by the citizens, of course, here in Nigeria and across the globe. I'd like to say a very big thank you to you, our amazing global audience, for joining us from the very start of the conference today till the end of today's session. It's been about almost 3 hours now of engaging and insightful conversation and discussion. Please make it a date tomorrow. Day 2 of the Taxpayers Conference 2022 is upon us. Ensure you're a part of the insightful conversations that will take place. Ensure you also share the link with your friends, your family, and other stakeholders. Know that this conference is about the taxpayer. So that is every single person. Are you a business owner? Are you a citizen of a country? Definitely you are. You must be a part of this conference. It's been my honor to host us for day 1. I am Damilola Busari. Tomorrow, by God's grace, my darling sister and colleague Funke Bolodueku would be the host. Thank you very much. Thank you once more to the convener of the conference, Mr. Olajide Omoshebi. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you to everyone for joining from across the globe. We've had people from Africa, from Asia, from the US. It has been an amazing time today. Thank you and see you tomorrow by God's grace. Goodbye.